Hey, everybody. It's so nice to welcome you back to my YouTube channel. It's been a while since I've recorded anything, so thanks for being patient with me. Um, I'm thrilled that we are back and that we have a really cool guest I've known now for a couple of years, Charlie Rykken. But before we dive in, I'd like to officially welcome you to the YouTube channel podcast. If you're new here, this is where we explore the intersections of learning, creativity, and the human experience through the lens of polymathy. We talk to extraordinary individuals who have navigated multiple fields and disciplines to achieve amazing things. And today, I'm so excited to have a chat with Charlie. So before we dive in, Charlie, it's great to have you here officially. Could you start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Basically, if I were to pick one feature of my life that is kind of a defining feature, it's a nearly fanatical love of learning, and most of the learning is colored or influenced by philosophical questions. And so I've spent a large portion. I've only worked on a full-time job 7 years in my life. I'm 76 now, and all that time I was working full time, I'm part-time rather. I was doing what I love to do, which was to learn about this and that and the other. So I covered a lot of different things, and so that's it's only recently in October of 2020 that I look back at my life and said, is there any way that I could have found a career doing what I do? And it just kind of hit me that in an ideal world, I would have been a philosophical journalist, somebody who really loves philosophy, but learns anything that is remotely connected to philosophy, like neuroscience or physics or psychology, or the list is very long, and so that's kind of a, a rapid synopsis of what I've been doing since I was about 7 or 8 years old.
I love that philosophical journalism. So we're going to talk more about that today, what it is and like what you think about it and your explorations into how philosophical journalism can help our world. But before we dive in, I just want to ask a fun icebreaker question. Okay, from one polymath to another. If you could master any skill or field overnight, what would it be and why?
Uh, Probably neuroscience. I mean, and because the brain is where a lot of this goes on. Although the body is a major part of how you function as a human being. It's that intelligence is embodied. It's metaphoric, and so on. So that too much of a focus on the brain is not a particularly healthy approach. But still, there is a lot of things that go on in the brain, and having a really good knowledge of that I'm learning it. I'm trying to learn it, but it's a tough subject. But yeah, if I could learn it, that would save me a lot of time.
Yeah,
If I could
neuroscience.
become a yeah, if I could become an expert on neuroscience overnight, that'd be cool.
That would be cool. All right. Well, let's shift gears back to philosophical journalism. What initially, was there something in particular that drew you to that, or how you learned about like even the phrase philosophical journalism? Like, just tell me more about your interest in that field and how you found it.
Um, well, ever since I was, in grade school, my mind had this rather strange way of acquiring knowledge, in that I didn't believe in anything really, but I believed in everything. And in a sense, you might say that's kind of like a polymath approach, so that I would have very contradictory things. That if somebody said something that was really interesting to me, I would check it out. And so I would look at things that were ideas that were hostile to each other, but they were interesting. And so I would look at both of them. And so in a sense, my head has been like a large meeting place, like a United Nations of ideas, where everyone gets a chance to speak, and I get the chance to hear what they have to say. And because it's the paradigm I use is the blind man and the monkey. Excuse me, the blind man and the elephant. Monkey. Anyway, yeah. So the idea is that everyone sees a piece of the world, Nobody sees everything, and so basically that's kind of what a journalist does. They when they go out to do a story, they try to interview as many people who are relevant to the story as they can, given the time frame, and then try to put it all together into a story. But it wasn't. I didn't have a very high opinion of journalists, and I never wanted to put a category on myself, to label myself. I was that. I felt kind of that felt offensive to me, so I didn't want to do it. And but it was like I in October of 2020, I had some free time because of the COVID restriction. Sitting there by myself and kind of wondering about this odd idea about, well, in an ideal world, would there be a profession that would fit me? And that just kind of popped into my head that, wow, yeah, philosophical journalism, that would be it. And so lately I've been getting very organized. I've got a database where I keep track of all of my searches on the internet for information. So that when I find something, I have it sorted away in a database, so I can go look it up later. And I've also developed something called topic models that's used in artificial intelligence, where you can take a whole bunch of articles and sort them out into the different topics that are discussed with those articles. Because I have a lot. I've been collecting articles since the internet first began, and they're up to about 100,000 articles. So being able to go back and find something that I remember reading something about that back in 2010 or something, or 1995, but I don't remember where it was. And so now all I have to do is just have this topic model thing, and it'll sort them all out for me. And so I'm in the process of getting that set up. But basically, I'm taking the whole idea of trying to be a journalist, and in the sense of developing that sense of discipline and organization, and trying to be, develop a well-informed view about something, so that I'm not doing sloppy stuff, and especially not saying things that I can't back up, and so on. So that's kind of a series of a process of discipline that I'm putting myself through right now to have some legitimacy in referring to myself as a philosophical journalist. Right now, I can't do that because but I'm in the process. I'm working on it.
Yeah. Well, that's a fun way to think about it. Part of what comes up for me is like there's this term, was it Carl Weick that came up with it? Being a sense maker, sense making as a thing.
Uh,
And it seems like today that philosophical journalism is like a way you can sense make. It's a way that people do sense making and share their own sense making with others, through the internet, basically. And I've seen like it just seems like this is like a new thing more of us are doing is becoming online sense makers. You could also call it philosophical journalism, but like how can we share our perspectives on what we see happening in the world, what makes sense, what's true, what's reliable, how do you weave it together and tell a narrative or story that actually makes sense when we're in this world where information is commoditized, information is up for purchase. It's the age of information and misinformation. So like finding voices that you can trust and that you want to hear from is like it's like a thing of the modern world now, where like that's what a lot of us want to do is like just figure out what the truth is and then share. And then this thing happens where we can co-sense make, like we can co-learn, we can start hearing what what
yeah.
your story is, and then I share my story, and then we hear their story, and then before you know it, we're becoming like a hive mind where we're making sense of the world in a more holistic way individually, but also collectively as we listen and learn from each other.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. And I think that's what we're headed towards. I see the the evidence that a lot of people are becoming aware of just what you said, and so for me, the way I would, one little wrinkle I would add in there is that the word meaning or sense making is contextualized by intention. So, the question is, why do you want to know this? To what end are you intending to use this knowledge or this truth? And I think that that there can be multiple, worthy, valuable intentions, and so uh, if, for me, I'm kind of at a more abstract level, but at an abstract level that potentially has applications. But I think a lot of people are very um, very grounded in the sense that this is what we really need to do in terms of getting organized, for instance. I'm not a very political person. I'm not very good at organizing people and so on, but some people are, and so it's not going to be one size fits all. That there's going to be different people who have different talents, and they're going to contribute in their way. And the thing is if we kind of have this awareness that we can do a lot more if we work together, and that we share, and realize that in a community there can be many voices. I think that the potential is incredible.
Yeah. And here's something I like to point out too, because I engage in this sort of like sense making narrative, like co-learning regularly with other people. So I'm refining my mental models of the world based on input from other people, some of which I adopt and some of which I reject. But I'm doing this constantly. Um, and God, what was I going to say? What do you look for? Like what as you're trying to like weave together a picture of the world, like what do you look for in terms of the information that you believe is true? Is there any common thread? How do you
Yeah,
determine
there
what you
is.
trust?
Well, I'm very oriented, grounded, I might say, in kind of an Asian perspective, in the sense of starting out with the awareness of, and that I am a human being, and that I am acting from that, so that there is something, like a true self. I'm more oriented towards Carl Jung than I am towards, say, Buddhism, or some people who say that there is no such thing as a self. I kind of don't think that's true. But so the for me, that one of the questions that I'm very interested in right now is the question of how can you put information together that would be useful. Okay, in other words, the idea is that the old way of thinking is to build a model, okay, a mathematical model typically, and then use that model for prediction and control. But I'm more interested in the idea of developing the kind of what you might call craftsmanship type of knowledge based on pragmatism of William James and people like that, so that the idea is more like a musician playing jazz, for instance. It isn't so much a matter of being in control and dominating. It's a matter of having a beautiful relationship, and so you want to develop skills that can enhance the likelihood of something like that happening. And so that's kind of trying to develop ways of gathering information, and organizing it in a way that can be helpful towards those goals. It's like I was saying before, its intention is important. Knowledge by itself is not not something that has any intrinsic meaning. Okay, the meaning comes from intention. So you have knowledge, but you have intention. That's where you get semantics, where you get meaning. And so if people start off with the idea where they want to be dominating, and they want to be in control, and to be able to predict and so on. I mean, prediction is a good thing too. I mean, if you're a musician, a jazz musician, you want to be able to kind of have some sense of prediction of where your fellow musicians are going with a very dynamic and living performance. And so, but anyway, that's kind of where my present almost fixation is oriented towards right now, is whether or not it's possible to use artificial intelligence to aid people in trying to finding practical solutions to real problems.
Yeah. There's a couple things I want to say in response. I just want to first off share a word that most people don't know that deserves remembering. You may know it already, but the word is consilience. Consilience. It's the
Mhm.
unification of knowledge. And when you think about the fact that humans have existed in the age of specialization for a long time. And what that meant was we put on professional blinders, we got in swim lanes and silos and cages of specialization. We de-skilled ourselves in many things so we could be really good in one, basically. That's what
Mm.
specialization is. Um, so what has happened is information got fragmented and sliced and diced, and everyone knew a whole lot about very little. And none of us were really looking around making sense of everything. And then now we have a poly crisis, or some people call it a meta crisis. And I personally think, well, what caused all these horrible things to happen? Well, maybe it was the fact that so many humans on planet Earth all put on their blinders and didn't consider the larger systems that exist inside systems inside other systems. And we have domino cascading effects now because of that decision to be specialized, which worked for a time and doesn't work anymore. So that's one quick thing. Do you have anything to say in response to that?
Well, you probably know about the book by Edward O. Wilson with the title Consilience, and it's he is approaching this more from a materialist, a mechanistic materialist point of view, and he's, I think that's a noble objective, a long term. But once you get into the social arena, it becomes unbelievably complicated, and so the trying to find some way. In fact, that's one of the things I'm very interested in. Is this? That's why I said neuroscience. Okay, uh, something I could learn overnight would be fantastic, because I do think that there is this very complex relationship between the physical world and the mental emotional world of human beings, and all life for that matter. And the whole question of what is consciousness and so on, that these are right now I'm uh, studying a guy, Matthew David Siegel, Segall, a fantastic guy who specializes in Alfred North Whitehead, and he's really good speaker. He has lots and lots of videos on YouTube. But anyway, it's Alfred North Whitehead started off as a mathematician. He was a student of Bertrand Russell, and they wrote this book called the Principia Mathematica together. And so he's someone who knows science extremely well.
I love
And so
Bertrand Russell, by the way.
yeah,
An amazing, brilliant mind.
yeah. But anyway, so this is something that I'm very interested in. Is this, where does the spiritual world, so to speak, meet the physical world? How much of what is human behavior is a product of physical conditioning, so to speak. You have they call it G cross E, genetics cross environment. So you get this interaction between the two, and that's, if I were to pick the other one, it would have been genetics, or especially behavioral genetics, to be the thing that I would like to learn overnight.
Yeah.
But yeah, between those two, I see is but that question is a very haunting question as to how do you have some kind of a consilience between the physical sciences and the social sciences. And right now, it's most of the stuff that's going on in academia, like postmodernism and things like that, are just massive failures from my point of view. And so it's, but back around the early part of the 20th century, the physical scientists took over, and a lot of the people in the social sciences got what I call physics envy, like B.F. Skinner, and wanted to turn everything, the human beings were just, a bunch of chemicals, and you want to do a stimulus response model, and, you don't know what's going on, but it doesn't matter. You just do a stimulus response model, and that's all you need to know. And you don't need to go into the black box. And so it's, no, I think it's important to be, understanding from within. Because if you get to know people, it's like forgiveness. I see forgiveness as understanding. When somebody does something that is hurtful, if you have a committed relationship, you want to try to work it out. You want to try to say, well, what's going on here? And if you can get to a point where you understand what the other person is saying or where they're coming from, that goes a long ways towards healing the relationship. And so for me, reality is all about relationships. It's not about objects and properties. It's about relationships, and that, I believe, goes down to the molecular level. And so it's I see that as the future science is going to be a relational science. It's going to be about, everything is really, reality is relationships.
Yeah, I love
And
that. And so much of human suffering occurs because the relations between people go bad and they just can't, it makes everything worse in life when we can't have healthy, good relationships. Um, a couple other things I wanted to share regarding like this idea of philosophical journalism, or another way of thinking of it roughly might be like sense making, like
yeah,
that, like
yeah.
it's a type of sense making. Um, and regarding the truth, like how do we find truth? How do we know what's true? Well, truth can be tested and questioned and triangulated, right? Like we could test it, and there's like that objective, rational version. But I would argue that for people who are sensitive and tuned in, the gut, the body tells us stuff. And the body has sensations, right? And for me, when I hear truth, it feels a certain way. It feels a way. And when I hear a lie, there's a feeling to it. Like that I read it. I feel so it's not just like that truth is now something we need to know in our heads. Like
Mhm.
that's great. Let's all keep doing that. Let's keep being rational and objective. But let's also develop our ability to feel how information is received by our own bodies, because our bodies are so intelligent, aren't they? Like there's so much information that's embodied, but we have to be sensitive enough to feel our guts and to feel our heart, to feel the energy of what's coming at us. So what do you think about that? Do you think that truth resonates in a different way and feels different in the body than something that's not true?
Uh, well, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, I come from a pragmatist position. That's kind of my preferred way of thinking of things. And within pragmatism, truth is what works. Just rather than thinking of something that sits independent of reality, whatever. So that's kind of a Platonic idea that there is truth that exists independent of human beings, and there, I think that there can be a recurring usefulness, okay, in terms of some type of knowledge of if I do this, then it's more likely that that will happen. And so it's again, it gets back to this idea of craft, okay, of living your life, and the idea of are you living in order to have a good relationship, or are you living to be in control? Are you living in order to be dominating, or are you living to be cooperating? And so the idea of truth is when you put it in when you understand it in those terms, the question of truth is very fluid, in the sense that there are very few things. I know within the Stoics they have this tradition of virtues, and they think that there are such things as eternal virtues, and I think, well, yeah, maybe, but it makes more sense to me is to have be in a place of clarity of intent, so that where you find you try to get yourself, like, to use Buddhist terminology, to become enlightened, and that is to be free of, uh, of delusional thinking, being able to see things as they are, to be present, and so that the this this idea of truth is something that is going to give you the likelihood of being in control and able to dominate. I don't see that as a healthy way of thinking about the world. I think it's much more better to have a large uh, toolbox, so to speak, that you can say, well, maybe this will work, maybe that'll work, and but where the intention is to to try to contribute towards making things healthier and better, and rather than being in control. Because I
Yeah.
think a lot of people that they get this obsession about wanting to dominate and be in control of things, that just doesn't work in the long run. Well, I think we're in a situation right now where many people think, well, I know the best way to get things under control, and and a lot of people who are being influenced by these people are saying, no, you're wrong. I don't want to be controlled like that. And so rather than people saying, can't we all just have a conversation about how we can get along better with each other? And and then the people who want to be in control are going to say, well, no, I want to be in control. so,
So here's
so that's
another, and as and we unfortunately do need to begin to our wrap up, but one of the things I wanted to share as well is that as we make sense of our world, individually or collectively, I think it's really important to make space for paradox and contradiction.
oh
It
yeah,
seems to be human nature, like the behavior I see rampant. And I think, by the way, our bodies are bifurcated in
yeah,
hemispheres, two halves. And so I personally think it's because of our physicality that we have two of a lot of our parts, or they're symmetrical even. I think it's maybe because of that, that mentally we tend to go, it's this or that. It's left or right, conservative or liberal, Democrat or Republican. I don't know, whatever it is that we do. Like there tends to be, it's this or that, and pick one, and you can only pick one. And that's the default. And the more I look around at the world, I realize, well, there's some truth and mistruths over there, and there's some truths and mistruths over there, and there's pros and cons of each side. And I would much rather take it all in and sit with it and see how I make sense of the full set of data rather than forming an allegiance to one side too quickly and making the other side bad or stupid or less than just because they're my out group. So this idea that, okay, we're trying to make sense of the world, let's not pick sides too quickly. Let's not be blindly allegiant. Let's make room for paradox and contradiction and a little bit of right and wrong over there and a little bit of right and wrong over there and see how we can synthesize it together. And so the truth for me, like given all of that, I think this applies to truth. There is no one definition of truth. There's many. That my truth is my truth, your truth is your truth. Humanity's collectively accepted truths are a thing. And then there's the real truth, which no human can ever know without a doubt. But some people will say, oh no, you have to be an expert to know the truth. Or, they're like, your truth is not truth. There's only the one truth. And like, there are all those truths. Everybody has what resonates for them. We all have what is the majority might accept as true. Those are all true. And then there's the actual objective reality, which, as humans with limited, imperfect brains, who knows if we ever really discover the truth? We can hope to get close to it, right? It exists, but will we ever know for sure? And truth should evolve. The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, a really hard book to read by Thomas Kuhn, pointed out like even science with its most rigorous rules and requirements evolves. Even science has, you know, information that or outliers that it finds, and it has to make room eventually. Like you can't ignore things that don't fit your model. The model must upgrade. So even science itself, which people seem to think is perfect, isn't. It changes and evolves because it's done by humans with imperfect minds, right?
yeah.
So what comes up for you when you hear all that jibber jabber?
Well, one thing in terms of the politics, when I was in high school, I read the autobiography of John Stuart Mill, and he mentioned that this idea that he was a liberal, okay, but he said that in every political debate, there's truth on both sides, And that, that stuck with me. That's something that's been part of my thinking all my life. And because it went along so well with my, the blind man and the elephant. Just because someone is got a hold of a trunk and another person has got a hold of a leg doesn't mean that they're wrong. It's just that they don't have the whole story. And it's an ongoing thing. It's the mystery of being is just that. It's a mystery, and
Yeah.
that's okay. It's okay that you don't know everything. You live your life as well as you can, and you learn what you want to learn, and you live your life the way you want, what you think is the valuable way, what your values would tend to indicate you should live your life, and so on. So but getting stuck on this idea that truth is black or white, or this there's a saying within logic called the rule of the excluded middle, and this is part of logic. It's either A or not A. You can't have both. You can't be A and not A. That's a contradiction, and so I call that the law of the excluded muddle. And because life is a model. Okay, you just kind of you're kind of doing the best you can and trying to make sense of the world, as you're saying. But you're not going to figure it all out. Nobody figures it all out. But you do the best you can. And there's this what's his name? Uh, uh, he's a 19th century English poet. He said that truth is beauty and beauty is truth, and that's all you need to know. And a lot of people could have trouble with that, but not for me. To me that trying to instead of make America great again, how about let's make the earth beautiful again? And what is more beautiful than a beautiful environment that isn't polluted, and all the animals are dying because of all the poison? That's not beautiful. And so it's truth is something that you live through the beauty that you create. And to me, that's the truth, okay, that matters. It's practical, it's pragmatic. And so trying to find, because the tendency when you want to label it, to say this is the truth, okay, if you look at that, you'll find that the people who are attracted to that are into this whole idea of domination and control, that they're fearful, and they're afraid of all the chaos and so on. And there's a lot of chaos, and you need to have a certain amount of order in a society to be livable. So I mean, their concerns are perfectly valid. That you do need to have a relatively stable culture, but you also need to have room for creativity and growth and learning, where you can change as the circumstances change. And so it's finding that balance between this need for order and also a need for discovery. But if you look at the households of people who are really creative, there tend to be kind of messy households. Okay, they're not really neat people, neat freaks. But if you look at someone who's like a CPA, or somebody who's an accountant who's got to get their books in order and so on. I don't know this for a fact. I haven't looked at the research, but I bet that CPAs have very nice, neat houses.
Well, I
No,
love truth, by the way. I have the word tattooed on my arm. And for me, truth is sanity. That's why I care about it. Because I don't want to live my life based on lies or misinformation. I want to be grounded on the solid surface of
yeah,
truth. And if I need to change my understanding of truth, I'm willing to. But unfortunately, we do need to start our lightning round. This
okay,
is we're near the end of our conversation. I'm just going to ask you a few quick questions, and you just share as quick as you can the
okay,
answers to these 4 questions. Okay? Question one.
okay.
What's the best book you have read recently?
Probably the Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate.
Oh,
It's
interesting. The
that's
Myth of
really,
Normal.
it's
Awesome.
it's about basically the idea that we're living in an insane society. So being normal is not healthy.
Love that.
It's
Okay. Good recommendation. Question two. What's one piece of advice that you'd give to aspiring polymaths?
don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't be afraid to be authentic.
Yeah,
Um,
good
in
one.
other words, be compassionate towards yourself, and just don't be afraid to be yourself.
Love it. Question three. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
Well, now I would say unquestionably Alfred North Whitehead, because I'm really getting kind of crazy about him because it's like his what his thoughts were. I had no idea how much his thinking resonates with my own. So it's yeah, it would definitely be Alfred North Whitehead.
Awesome. I'm gonna have to check him out. Last question. What is next on your journey?
Getting myself put back together again. I recently went through a major psychological change in like in Dabrowski's idea of a positive disintegration. I'm kind of shattered into a whole bunch of little pieces right now, and so I'm kind of gathering up the pieces and trying to sort out the good from the bad and to create a new improved version of Charlie, who's going to be a lot more focused and a lot more self-disciplined and so on, and also having a whole lot more fun with life. So
I love that. Well, kudos to you for continuing to do that work on yourself, as we all should. All right. Well, this has been such an interesting conversation. And before we wrap up, Charlie, are there any final thoughts or messages that you'd like to share with our audience before we leave today?
well, only one thing, and that is I want to thank you very much, Angela, for the work that you're doing because I really think it's important. I really believe that the polymath community are really going to be a major contributor towards the healing that really needs to happen, and being able to see things from so many different points of view, helps to being able to understand the bigger picture and what really needs to be what can be helpful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And I really appreciate that. All right. Well, Charlie, thanks for joining us today and for sharing your wisdom and insights. And also thank you to anyone tuning in for watching. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with your friends if you enjoyed it. Stay curious, keep learning, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.